Welcome back to Briggs on Business. Today, by the way, is January 22nd, 2025. We're going to have a very timely conversation today. Did the world change? Is something different? I just feel this giant lift of confidence in the markets and everything. I don't know. But I don't know anything about markets and things like that. But I know who does. We have a guest from time to time. Welcome. Let's see if I can find him. There he is. John Grace. Welcome, John Grace. Is it a new day? It's an all new day in America?
Well, many people believe, Mike Briggs, we're off to the races. Happy days are here again. We've got a brand new administration, and so many businesses are so optimistic, imagining that the next 100 days are going to be unlike anything you've ever seen before. Yeah. So, you can place bets wherever you like, and everything you put a dot on where you throw your dart, that means you're going to see new highs. That's what a lot of people are just suggesting and relying on, I think.
But, John, people who have been through a few years, like you and I have, we've seen all kinds of things happen. There's no real certainty, is there?
Well, nothing's certain, and particularly with this administration, there are a lot of uncertainties. And so, yeah, it's viewed as a very pro-business attitude. Mm-hmm. A lot of the restrictions that some people have a problem with might get removed or reduced, or people get pardoned. Who imagine that, right?
Yeah.
After you do all kind of damage to person and property. You walk away with a pardon. So, I mean, does that mean that it's a new version of Wild Wild West? And as long as we're on the same side, we can both do havoc and survive. The way I look at it is no matter the sports, I like to use a sports metaphor because everybody likes sports, right? And no matter the team who you're rooting for, they have two components, don't they? An offensive side and a defensive side, right? And particularly with football, they're pretty well equally weighted in terms of the number of people.
Right.
It's entirely different teams, right?
Yep.
Entirely different players that want to advance the ball and those who want to keep your team from advancing the ball. So the real problem, or the opportunity, I should say, is before we just keep smoking the hopium, saying happy days are here again and we're off to the races, It makes sense to me to look at this from a defensive situation relative to how can investors determine in advance what kind of loss they can live with, and we'll go through an example, and then how is the portfolio designed to maybe work within those parameters so that if the market's off X, but you're off Y, and your number's closer to Y, what do they say, right? If you find yourself in a ditch, stop digging. So how might investors limit their losses and set those parameters in advance up front so if the bottom does fall out, it's you don't need a Hail Mary pass just to get your team back in the game. So I would say let's take a good example here, Mike. We could talk through this, and hopefully this will make sense to your audience. Let's suppose that your audience are very affluent. They've sold two businesses for $2.5 each. That means they've accumulated $5 million from the sale of the two businesses. And most advisors suggest that a 4% withdrawal is probably pretty reasonable to live off of it. So 4% on 5, that's what, $200,000 a year? I think most people would be very happy with that kind of income in retirement, right?
Yes.
You can kind of do whatever you like. But let's suppose, to your point, I mean, we've been, through two 50% losses in the same decade, 2002 and 08, 09, two in the same decade. Now, let's suppose that there's a 50% loss in this couple's future. I don't know when. I'm just saying, let's just imagine. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. If you're used to getting the $200,000 and your account value dropped from $5 million to $2.5 million, if you still need that $200,000, what must your withdrawal rate do? It's got to double. It's got to go from a 4% withdrawal to an 8% withdrawal on the 2.5 to get the $200,000 a year to live the way you prefer to live. Now, you tell me what you think this plane might do after it's been cut in half, and we're now taking withdrawals of 8%.
It's going to drop faster, certainly.
It's going to drop faster. It's probably going to be a hard landing. And that's the point that I think you're making. I'm certainly trying to do my best to make, to say, look, folks, who knew these firestorms would just come out of nowhere and just absorb all these homes and displace people, some for years, I imagine. And I'm so sorry that's happened to clients and people around the country. The fires here and the snowfalls over there. But the real question becomes, how can we survive and thrive? So we're suggesting that people look in advance to see what kind of loss can you live with and how might you prepare your portfolio so that in advance it moves to safety. You know, you might not stay in the same shares you owned. You might increase your cash balance from a starting amount of 5% to 100%. What is the portfolio designed to do in advance? So when things get ugly and you're busy, the portfolio becomes more defensive so that you know, I mean, look at Warren Buffett. What was he just a year ago, sitting on something like $160 billion? And if I'm not mistaken, I think that number today is more like $325 billion. And he's what, 95?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, he's not trying to recover.
Right.
I think who knows what he's doing? I imagine, because this is one of the things he does, he's built up a fantastic war chest. What does that allow him to do? Be able to buy from distressed sellers. That's not a bad thing.
He's getting his cash pile ready.
Yeah, and we don't want your audience to be a distressed seller. We want them to have the cash and the capability to plan in advance so they can buy from distressed sellers, and that way enjoy the next wave as opposed to having a whole lot of regret that they may not outlive.
So you need to decide how much income you can afford to lose, and then decide a strategy to be ready, because the downs always come. It's never not happened.
No, and I mean, you know, to kind of put it in maybe a more interesting way, or one that I think people will understand, if you and I are looking at each other or at our phones and we're jaywalking across the street, it's typically not the bus we saw that hit us.
That's right.
It's the one we didn't see, we didn't time, we did not name, and if we're lucky, we get to peel ourselves up off the pavement, take a picture of the license plate of the bus, and move on. But if we're plastered and can't get up, well, it's kind of hard to move on. And that means we have to be agile, right? Movement's good for our minds, our bodies, and our investments. We got to be in position. I was just on a conversation with an expat moved to Costa Rica. Lovely home, 4,500 square feet. They put $2 million into this home, and they only have $200,000 outside of the home. That's a big bet. That's an exponentially outsized bet. All of their assets are in one property, all in one asset class. I'm saying to them, this is scary, okay? So you may want to revisit how much risk you are accepting, because if for whatever reason, not only the stock market drops precipitously, real estate around the world drops precipitously, maybe fueled by China. It would surprise me if they're the leader of the pack this time around. But again, how can you limit your exposure to risk and your exposure to losses?
Right. And in the example of the house in Costa Rica, they put it all in one spot pretty much, because $200,000 is not really that much to, you know.
No, $200,000 next to $2 million. You know, I'm like, we don't have any cash. That's what he said. It all went into this beautiful property that's gone up 50%. Okay, well that just means you further extended your risk. And if you put $2 million, because they bought it all cash, $2 million of your hard-earned money into one place, and now it's worth $3 million, you kind of go, right, I'm Tarzan. Well, suppose you wake up and Tarzan meets Jane, or something happens, and what was $3 million goes to 1.5. I'm just being ridiculous here, but you put $2 million of your hard-earned assets. This wasn't the bank's money. This is your money. And the value goes from $3 million to 1.5. Well, it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. How low can it go? And you know, when these things unravel, what do they say about stocks in particular? The stock market tends to take the stairs up and the elevator down. So it, you know, the decline, kind of like a snowball effect, is incrementally faster than the rise. And that's what I think people are not paying attention to, how quickly this could become unraveled for reasons we do not foresee.
I think I told you this story in 2008. You know, it's going down. I didn't even realize it was going down. I still had 20 employees on the books, and you know, by the time the year was over, I was bust. So
yes, that's exactly what we're saying in terms of riding that, trying to cross the street. You didn't see the bus coming, and then all of a sudden you wake up and go, "Oh my goodness, everything has changed." Look at this, the Pacific Palisades area. I mean, it's always been a glorious place to live. Okay, who imagined 5,000-6,000 homes would just be crushed? I mean, gone. Who was prepared for that? And by the way, there were some people who were prepared for that in that community. One story I found, a gentleman made up a sprinkler system on his roof, and around his grounds using the pool water. So his house survived. He was able to help some of his neighbors increase their odds of survival. He was much better prepared than most. Now, that's the good news. His house survived. He doesn't have any electricity. He doesn't have any gas. All right. And the smell, I have to imagine, can't be terrific.
No.
And just coming in and out of the house can't feel like I'm having a nice day. But at least his house survived, and that's what I'm saying. We all want to be able to tell the story as opposed to be in the news where they're talking about those nice people who are gone.
Yeah. And by the way, in your bus analogy, that you didn't see the bus coming, but you know a bus is going to come every 20 minutes, so you got to get ready.
And as I say, one of the things that people have to look at is how big is your bet.
Yeah.
The folks that are living in this, as I understand it, in Costa Rica, a lot of them are expatriates. Mm-hmm. I imagine their situation is not much different than the gentleman and his wife that I was talking to, in that most of their assets are either exponentially in real estate or exponentially in stocks. Mm-hmm. And when we look at Yale as an example, what I find, and I look once a year, Yale endowment, I think it's $40.7 billion. Only 3% of the portfolio, last I looked, was in U.S. stocks. I think 9% of the portfolio was in real estate. My point is, notice how little exposure they have as compared to most of us having so much exposure. Mm-hmm. And many of us may have 2 or 3 asset classes. I count at least twice that with Yale, with no position more than high teens. So I'm counting maybe 5, 6, 7 asset classes. We can't do what the endowments do, but we can learn from them. And we can see they don't have a 30, 40, 60, 70% bet in any one place, less than 20% in any one place, but 6 or 7 different legs under their portfolio stool. That's just going to make for a stronger portfolio no matter what happens or when it happens.
Yeah. Watch Yale. Watch Warren Buffett. What are these guys doing? And they always seem to be ahead of the curve, that's for sure.
Well, I think they do their homework, and Buffett is famous for, he and Charlie Munger passed away, his partner, but they would suit up. They would suit up to go to the office, get out of the house, and then I think each of them only had one. It's kind of interesting by itself. Well, actually, Warren bought another one in Laguna where they would go to for the summer, but he sold that, and he said he wished he had not really bought it. Of course, hindsight's 20/20. But what I'm saying is that they went, they dressed up, they read, they did their homework. They didn't just throw darts in the dark, which is what you and I are seeing right now. And as long as whatever I threw the dart on, if that target's going up in value, I get to think I'm so smart.
Yeah.
But when it reverses itself, I don't feel too smart. In fact, I may live with regret. And unfortunately, if we look at what happened to adults after the Great Depression, stocks dropped 80%, took 20, 25 years to come back to even. New York real estate dropped, 70%? Oh yeah, it came back to even. In 4 decades it took New York real estate to fully recover. So what does that mean? If we were adults and we were in our 40s, and then it took 25 years for stocks, assuming we didn't sell a share, and 4 decades for real estate, assuming we still held the same property, neither of those came back while we were still here. It's kind of tough to have a nice day. I'm afraid a lot of us as adults then died with regret.
Now, I know, and I'm not going to ask you to predict the future, but there's a lot of confidence being projected, but it's really a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't know if there's going to be tariffs. We don't know what's going to, they're going to go put some people out of business because they don't like them or something. It's kind of an uncertain time as well.
Yes, it is. But, one of the things that is certain, and that's looking at the real trump cards, if you will, that's on purpose. That, of course, would be Father Time and Mother Nature. And let's look at longevity. Let's look at mortality, right? There are not more people showing up on the planet. There are not more people coming here. There may be other places they might be welcome, but I'm just saying that the average mortality in other countries outside the U.S. is well into their 80s. And in the U.S., it might have gotten up to late 70s. But here comes 76 million people. Bill Clinton and Donald John Trump turned 78 last year. Boomers were born 1946, 1964. Here comes 76 million people following them. Meantime, right now, if I'm not mistaken, 11,000 people a day are turning 66. So here come more and more people who are getting to the age, for example, with their traditional retirement accounts, where you have to start taking withdrawals. So before you could, buy low and hold and hope, but now you bought and you must take withdrawals from your traditional retirement accounts. And every year, no matter what your account did last year, the IRS requires you to increase your withdrawals every year that you're alive. So again, we really want to look to see how can we limit those losses, because if your required distribution is 3, 4, 5%, and you stick around and now it's 6 or 7 or 8%, again, no matter what your account did, man, I would submit to you that it's really incumbent upon us to see what we can do to limit our losses, because we may not stick around long enough to see the recovery, and a lot of people are worried about getting old and not having enough money, and then long-term care and health issues show up. There's just a lot of things that we can see happening right here as we're witnessing all this uncertainty, not quite sure which way is up.
Amazing. It's always a wake-up call when I talk to you, John. We kind of say the same thing, but it just wakes me up. Oh my gosh, he's right. We got to get ready for this. And we've gone past time again, but any last thoughts you want to share with our viewers on anything?
Well, I will just say what we're watching very closely, your viewers might want to watch as well. It's a real easy marker. We're looking at the S&P 500. That's the largest index, certainly in this country and most, frankly. And we're looking at the level of 6,000. Now, will we finish the year at 6,600? Some people suggest that. I don't know. I can't foresee the future. If we keep stepping ahead of 6,000, we may have some more upside here. That would be a good thing. And yet, suppose, as I say, let's be ridiculous. Let's suppose, for whatever reason, we wake up and it takes a year or two for it not to go to 6,600. It goes to 3,300. I don't know. All I'm saying is that's why it's so important that every team has an offensive side and a defensive strategy. What's our defensive strategy in the event that the economy or the market just comes apart at the seams? I want to see that in the news. I don't want folks to be in the news going, oh my goodness, I lost my house, I lost my stocks.
Yeah.
and now you look at it, was this avoidable? The answer is maybe, but you gotta see those exits in the theater before the fire starts. Yep. That's what we got to do. See the exits.
Ready.
So if there's a fire that starts, you know exactly what to do to get your family and your assets out of a building in flames.
John, I sure appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with our viewers. I have your web address on the screen. I have your phone number on the screen. And I'm going to close with, I don't know what you call this thing, a captcha or something. Point your phone at this and it'll open up some information on John. Thank you so much, John.
Sure thing. And let me just close, Mike. We're happy to sit with some people, your audience, for 15 minutes, no cost, no obligation, to see what this information might mean to them.
Yeah, a free visit with John is well worth it. So, John, we will talk to you next time. And for our viewers,
Look forward to it, Mike.
We'll stick
Thanks
around.
so
We'll
much.
be back with another guest right after this.